They're gonna have to glue you back together.
The Demolisher. One of the second most iconic enemies in Dying Light. The first one being the Voltos, of course, but I will get into that in a much more different future. But the Demolisher is a very interesting enemy because it is very easy to deal with, but at the same time it is also very annoying to deal with. Of course, if you don't have the right proper tools with you. And why do I say it is annoying? Because it is very inconsistent at certain times, because in the first game, there were many different varieties of the Demolisher. Did they have any sort of different gameplays, like maybe different moves? No! They have none of it. Why? Because fuck you, that's why. They don't have anything special. The only difference between them is the looks. That's it. Here's one with a gas tank on their pack. Now here's another one with a more military look. And they don't do anything different. But why am I saying that they are inconsistent at certain times? Well, that's because you could literally grab the same exact weapon and bash them on the head, and all of them would either die in 2 hits, or die after you hit them for 500 fucking times. It is very inconsistent. So, unlike in the second game, where it's actually much more consistent, I'm going to teach you how you can actually deal with this fat ass. Well, not exactly, even though he's like very beefy, but who really cares at this point? But I'm going to teach you the very sheer basics of how this big guy works, and how you can pretty much deal with them, and what type of equipment you should be using against him. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. The most common attack that the Demolisher usually does is a ground attack that usually sends in a shockwave that follows in a straight line. This is a very easy attack to dodge, and it's not really that much big of a deal to deal with. Just don't dodge backwards. Either go sideways, or you could either jump on a high building. And another common attack that the Demolisher usually does is charging towards you. This does not usually occur when you're far away. He always does this, regardless of if you're literally right next to him or not. It does not matter. He will always do it at most times, but it's not as common as the ground slam. Another thing that he sometimes does is ripping off concrete floor and toss it at you. When does he do this? Well, there are a few specific areas. One is randomly, even though you're standing on the same ground level as him, and another time where he always does it is whenever you're on a high surfaces that he normally cannot reach you. And for that, he always tries to throw it at you. And the perfect timing for you to dodge it is as soon as he throws it, because if you try to always constantly zigzag around, he's always going to be able to follow your movement, so there's no really way to trick his movement. So the only time you should really be moving or try to dodge it is as soon as he throws it. Another also common attack that he sometimes does is very specific, but he only does this whenever he misses your charge or whenever you stagger him in a specific way, which I will get into in a little bit. When he's staggered, he usually goes in this frenzy where he starts to flail his arms around, hitting anything that comes at him, which it's not really that much threatening. You just simply have to sit back and wait for his damn tantrum to end. Oh, and I also forgot, there is also a very special attack that he sometimes does, but it's not really that much known. If there are also smaller infected that is around the Demolisher, he will sometimes throw them at you. Not necessarily throw them in a way you think. He doesn't like grab them and throw them, he more or less just punches them out of the way in order to, knock you out. And I should also mention that every single attack that the Demolisher does will always knock you on the ground if you get caught within it. Unless you have a booster to prevent that from happening. But every single attack that you get hit by it will always knock you on the ground regardless of how much armor you have. And there's also a smaller attack that he sometimes does, but he doesn't really do it that much, or at least that's what I notice, is he just does a simple bitch slap at you when you're close to him, that's it. But then again, it doesn't really occur that much unless you're right next to him. There's also another attack that is also very common that he does, is he sends in a constant shockwave at a 360-degree radius that is very long. And you will normally see this when he sort of has like his arms flailed up in the air, and then he starts bashing the floor, and then that's where you will notice that there's a lot of shockwaves from happening. Do not try to approach him, as it will damage you and knock you on the ground. So the only time you should really be charging in at him at that phase is never, unless you're a fucking idiot and you just go for it instantly. So I would not suggest it. But either way, how do you fight off against him? Well, that's very easy. But firstly, let's talk about the equipment that you might have on your arsenal. Firstly, let's start off with the skills. The enemy jumping skill is very effective in uncertain situations, but it's not really that much effective. And I don't know how you're able to jump over him, even though he's like 3 meters tall or some shit. But I don't know, I'm not gonna question the game's logic because nothing makes sense. Who even makes sense in this game, either way, so who cares? But the enemy jump is only effective if you're certain that you don't have time to run away from him when he is about to ground slam you or perform a 360-degree shockwave attack. That's the only time the enemy jumping skill is effective. There are also two other skills that is very useful, and you might be able to use it against him at every single encounter. Those being drop kicks and as well as the bashing skill. Because, for some reason, Techland has decided that these two skills together should be able to stagger bigger enemies. Now, is it bullshit and unfair? Yes. Do we care? No. The enemies don't have feelings, so why should we care? But either way, the bash and the dropkick skill always and will always stun them, no matter if they're blocking it or not. Oh, and I also forgot to mention they will block, but it's really not that much noticeable. It's literally just a forgettable feature that you should not really be paying attention a lot, so forget about it. But every time you dropkick or bash the Demolisher, they will always be staggered regardless if they're about to perform an attack. So if they're charging at you or they're about to perform a ground slam or whatever, if you literally just dropkick them, they will always be staggered, which is a very good thing. But let's say theoretically, you're new to the game. Sort of. I'm hoping not, but let's say theoretically, you don't have those skills at your disposal. So what do you do against him? Just be cautious. I know that's easier said than done, but literally just be cautious. The ground slamming attack, like I said earlier, it sends a forward shockwave that follows you, but only in a straight line. So either dodge sideways, right or left, or jump on a high building, or on a surface, whatever it is. And if the Demolisher does a 360 shockwave attack, or ground pound, whatever the fuck you want to call it, just simply back out. That's it. Just simply back out and wait for it to end. If he's charging at you, either dodge it or hide behind cover. When he hits something, he will always be staggered for a split period. And when he throws in a tantrum, do not fight him, unless you have a very long weapon. That's pretty much it. And finally, when he's about to throw something at you, just dodge it. Like I said earlier, just simply dodge it at the perfect opportunity when he throws it. That's it. Like I said, he follows your movement, so you're not able to zigzag it around that much easily. So only dodge it when he is about to throw it, or as soon as he throws it. And that's pretty much it. But what weapon you should really be using against him? Well, pretty much every single weapon you can practically think of is very effective. But there are 3 weapon categories that are very effective against him. Those being long weapons, two-handed weapons, and polearms. Because of their bigger size and as well as their bigger reach, you're able to hit the Demolisher at certain times where you should not be able to hit them normally. This is especially noticeable when he's throwing a tantrum. Normally with one-headed weapons, you have to get very close to them in order to hit them. But because long weapons, two-handed weapons, and as well as polearms have a much more longer range, you're able to hit them at a much more safer distance without getting hit. That is, of course, unless you get too close to them, then you will get hit. But what about the ranged weapons? Are they ineffective against him? Yes, they are, but do not use the bow. That one's a piece of shit, so just throw it out of the garbage. Crossbows are also very effective if you can aim, of course, but if you can't, do not bother using it. Pistols are not really that much effective, honestly, because they're more or less focused on singular enemies or in much more smaller types of enemies, but we're not going to talk about that. SMGs are also pretty good if you're able to land them on the head, but use the assault rifle or the shotgun since they're pretty much the monster destroyers of the game. Or, you know, you could just forget about that entirely and use explosives, specifically C4. Landmines and grenades are not really particularly that effective because you're relying on a timer, but C4 you can actually stick the damn thing onto the big guy and literally just constantly stack them all together and walk away in a safer distance and blow it all up. That is of course if the C4 is max level, but you know, I'm not going to say much. But yeah, use either shotguns or rifles against them if you're planning on using guns. Use C4 if you're planning on using some sort of accessories, and when it comes to boosters, the toughness booster is effective not only because it provides less damage reduction, or pardon, more damage resistance, but it also softens your hit reaction, Meaning, instead of knocking you on the ground, it's simply going to push you backwards every time you get hit. So if you're surrounded by enemies, this should be able to help you out a lot. Now, there is an alternative version of the Demolisher. It's not like in the first game where it's literally just like a different recolor or like different clothing. This one is actually behaves differently. And it's called the, if I'm not mistaken, this is from the Bloody Ties DLC. This is called the Gorilla alternative of the Demolisher. Again, I could be very mistaken about this, so I'm not really sure. But what is exactly different about them? Well, they have their own little separate attacks, but they also share some attacks from the normal Demolisher. But the special attacks that they have are, they're able to pounce on you, somehow. I don't know how they're able to lift their hefty-ass asses off the floor and jump at you at such high speeds and such high verticality, but I'm not going to question it. But they're somehow able to literally launch themselves and land onto you. So, yeah, it is a very hard skill to dodge, or a very hard attack to dodge, and you need to be very reactive to it. Like, you have to be pinpoint accurate with how you dodge it, because even if you're a split second late, he will be able to catch up to you and knock you off the floor. So you have to either dodge sideways. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You can only dodge sideways. You can't really dodge backwards because there is a bit of a shockwave effect that normally occurs, but it's not really that much noticeable. It only occurs sort of on the front a lot, but it doesn't really affect it that much around them. So another common attack that they usually do, or have a special attack that the normal Demolisher don't have, is, I can't really give a name, but they just sort of walk forwards and attack. Instead of throwing a tantrum like the normal Demolisher does, he instead walks towards you and starts swinging his arms around. And this is very easy to dodge, just simply back out, or if you have a longer weapon, you can literally hit them in a very specific distance. Just be sure you don't get close to him. And that's pretty much all I can offer. The Demolisher is not really that much big of a threat if you really think about it. You just simply have to be very cautious of your surroundings and as well as his attacks. He's very slow, but he's not also slow at the same time. His attacks are slow, that's the thing. But when he's charging at you, he's very fast, so you have to be very precise about him. And I also forgot to mention a small little detail is, if he's charging at you and you get hit by it, be ready to get your ass pounded off the floor, because unlike in the first game where once the Demolisher charges at you and they stop entirely, in the second game they will continue. They are not stopping until they miss entirely or they hit on a wall. So that's pretty much it. Oh, I forgot to mention weapon modifications. That's one part I forgot to mention. Weapon modifications are also somewhat effective against the Demolisher, but not entirely. Electricity, fire, acid, ice, they don't really do much besides only being a damage over time effect that applies to them, but it does sort of stun them for a split second, but it's not really that much noticeable because it doesn't really have the same effect as like the smaller infected, so yeah. But the one modification that is going to help you a lot against the Demolisher is the impact modification, and it is very good. And when you should be using the modifications? Well, very simple. If you're confident that you're not able to dodge an attack, or you don't really have enough stamina, or you don't have enough time to run away, then you can instantly just activate the impact mod on the Demolisher to stop them entirely. It basically just behaves the same way as the dropkick and as well as the bashing skill. So, yeah. There's really not much else to really say about it other than that stat. So, in short summary, every single melee weapon works against him, but if you want to be more effective, two-handed weapons, long weapons, and polearms are very effective. For guns, either use assault rifles or shotguns. If you don't have those, either use SMGs or the crossbow. Those are very effective. When it comes to accessories, only use the good old C4. Grenades are fine, but they're not really that good as the C4, and the only reason I'm really saying that it's because the C4 has a bigger explosion radius and as well as bigger damage. So if there's enemies around it, you can literally just jump in, give the big fat prick a couple of gifts, and run the fuck away. Because once you get caught in the explosion radius of the grenade, you're most likely going to get beaten a lot, because the Demolisher does not show any mercy, much like in the first game where they take easy on you. No, he goes all in. And that's pretty much all I can offer. And the only booster you really should be using against him is, like I said, the toughness booster. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully this is a very easy tutorial. I wouldn't necessarily say tutorial, but this is more like a simple guide. I hope this is a very simple one to understand. And that's pretty much all I can offer. Now, if you excuse me, I'm probably going to go and do some horrendous crimes that's probably going to lead me to a federal prison forever. But don't worry, I have a very good lawyer on my back, so you don't have to worry about that one. I won't disappear like I did before, so without wasting any more time, hope you have a good day, treat each other with respect, and I will see each and every one of you next time. Now get out of here.